Okay, this is the March ARB Aero Club. ARB Aero Club. This is the safety meeting for December 2017. I'm Roger Mann, and I'm the safety officer, and Bob here is the Aero Club manager, and our chief flight instructor is sitting right here, John, and the cameraman sitting right there asleep. Actually, his son is doing it, so he's the one taking. Let's see, and Jerry, is Jerry here? I didn't see him.
He was here.
Oh, yeah, there he is, he's hiding. Okay, yeah, Jerry Rollis, and then we got Garrett Carson still. Good. All right, and I think that's it. Okay, tonight we're gonna do things a little differently since we can't get half this stuff up here to work. However, the most important part of it is working quite well. And Darren Chung, who's going to be our presenter tonight, and I want you to welcome him when he comes up here. Don't do it yet because I'm still up here, but I'm still going to do my little routine that I normally do each meeting, and one of those is introducing new members. I don't think we have any new members in here right now. I'm not sure. Oh, that's right, yes. Stand up and introduce yourself.
Steve Gary from San Diego.
He's been acclimated into the T-34 with us.
Still more reflective.
Retiree and a CFI.
Yeah, he's a retiree and a CFI. We are trying to talk him into helping out on being an instructor here. I don't know if that'll work or not, but we'll see. Anybody else? Okay, has anybody here earned anything like soloing for the first time, or got their license, or been violated? Any of those things?
Run incognito.
Yeah. Incognito. We do have a few people here that haven't been around for a while, but, okay, so nobody has anything.
Jason John got his commercial. He's gone back to Clovis. Finished up this week or last week?
Last Wednesday, Jason John got his commercial pilot's license in Whiskey Papa, and boy, did he work hard for it. He spent a lot of money on it too, but he was all nervous and just overstudied quite a bit. And Jerry was his instructor, and he went to the check ride, and we asked him, well, how was the check ride? And he says it was kind of disappointingly not as hard as I thought it was going to be. And he said it was about one of the easiest things he's ever done. I don't know about Jason, but
just one line that I think sums up his preparedness.
yeah.
On the way over to the check ride, he was a little bit nervous, so he stopped by the 3 landings in Redlands on the way over to meet them. Give the flavor.
Yeah. Jason here got his, what, 2 months ago, 3 months? When it was?
About a year ago.
A year ago. My goodness.
Roger's just catching up.
Yeah, I know, I am. Yeah,
It was
well,
December a year ago. Same plane.
same
What that
thing.
computer does to you?
Yeah.
Same CFI or DP.
Oh, it's the same DP? Okay. Yeah, so, for you guys that are wanting to continue flying after you get your private, that's another goal to go for, believe me. You will work hard for it, though. And I highly suggest Jerry to be your instructor. Not to say that John is a good instructor, but John is a little too busy with being chief pilot, so. So anyhow, it's worth the time and the money to do it, to get that rating. Okay, let's see, what else do I do? Oh yeah, experiences. Does anybody have any kind of experience that they need to talk about or can talk about? It doesn't have to be just Aero Club. It can be Air Force. It can be airlines. It can be anything where you had yourself an experience. Yeah.
Per Roger's request, Carlsbad now has 5 transient parking spots, which I think fill pretty quick, so if you're going there for lunch, your only other option is parking at Western Flight, and they try to get you for $20. So I asked them for a military discount. They gave it for 10. I don't know if that's going to happen every time, but yeah, there's 5 parking spots. So we're gonna go for lunch. Bring some.
So go 10 minutes further to Gillespie, and you can park all over Gillespie.
Yeah, exactly.
With an Uber up
Yeah,
And another thing about Carlsbad, if you haven't been to Palomar lately, they are now a commercial service airport, which means TSA owns the ramp, which means it's a pain in the ass to get on and off the ramp. When you land, somebody from Western Flight has to come out, escort you off the ramp, and when you're ready to go back to your airplane, somebody's got to escort you out there.
So that's why security was by the gate and one ran.
Yeah.
yeah.
So, that's what Carlsbad is.
And I think more and more airports are going that direction too, because I read that, I think it was in AOPA where I read it, that more and more airports are really pushing to do that, because part of the problem with these across the nations, you know, as all of you know, that a lot of places are trying to shut down their airports because they don't think they need them anymore. And one of those things that they use as an excuse is the security, you know, oh wow, you know, one of those airplanes could be used as a bomb. So, so a lot of airports, to try to get that good PR, they are doing a lot of increased security. I think Redlands is one of those too. So, anybody else? Yeah, Robert. What's that? The
Santa Monica.
oh, Santa Monica. Oh yeah, yeah. Okay. Well, yeah. I'm just not sure what politically what's going on there. Yeah, is it? Yeah, so they're not really going to. Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. All right. If there's nothing else, Steve Frost. Oh yeah, go ahead.
My question is, I've heard or read that I could fly in here and go to lunch at the little cafe, but I've always been hesitant because I couldn't get on the base, and I always thought, why
Yeah.
would they let me land here?
Yeah,
So,
the difference is that when you're in your airplane, at least you don't have a gun facing you, although if you try to taxi this way, I'll guarantee you will see lots of guns on you, and it'll be a lot worse than going through the gate. Basically, yes, you can come here to go to Millionaire. That's it. So when you do call in here, although probably the best thing to do is just flight plan yourself going to Millionaire, and then when you land, make sure that you go to Millionaire. And yeah, it's still they'll let you do that, and you go down there and eat in a restaurant.
So on the south end, you won't be able to go any place further. You'll use the big runway, 3-2, so land short, get off early, and then it's taxiway Alpha, which is back to the south to Millionaire. It's as far as you can go.
thanks.
Yeah. Yeah, you're welcome to come in and just go the other way.
On an air traffic standpoint, when you're coming down Gulf, it's kind of hard to see, and we have a lot of transits that roll past Gulf all the time. Please know where Gulf's at.
Oh, yeah.
It's because the signage is getting fixed. Gary's working on it right now, but I'd say 60-70% of the transits come back, they roll past Gulf almost every time they do 180 on it.
Yeah. He's the ATC guy here, so. All right, Steve, if you're ready to come up here, Steve's going to share something about basic med.
Don't boo me, I didn't ask for this, I'm just giving you some information.
Hey.
This has to do quiet. This has to do with this basic med physical. I know there's some questions on it. This has a lot of the answers to paper questions you may have about it. Getting caught up on my paperwork, I went through the basic med physical. I just decided when I retired that I do an annual physical once a year. My insurance pays for it, and that suffices for the other physical. And so when you take your physical with your doc every 4 years, you have to take a written test every 2 years. And other than that, the rest of this, the Aero Club put a file or a copy on file, and the rest of it is just between you and your doc. And it's a very simple process. there was no other reason to go through it than the simplicity when I did it. And so if you have any questions about it, there's some paperwork here to answer your questions. Any questions of me? I'm always this pleasurable.
It seemed to you, now when you get that form that the doctor fills out,
Yes.
does that just go with your logbook or something like that, or is that?
You keep a copy, you have to have, it's just like the rest of your certificates, you have to have them with you in case you get ran check. Just keep it on board with you. It's very simple, they just put a yes or no, they talk about, whether you have headaches, dizziness, unconsciousness, all the same stuff that you answered before. It just says yes or no. And it's a very basic form, 4 pages, and then you sign it on the back, and they give you a copy of the certificate that has been completed, the FAA approved basic med online course, and you keep this little certificate with you. Tells you what your number is and how long it's good for. Okay, but you have to have a copy with you, copy on file with these guys. It's really a simplistic program. So, any questions? Sir.
We got a course online that's free at King Schools where I work, but it is a free course. As I understand it, you only have to have your paperwork in your logbook. You do not have to have it with you. All you have to have with you is your driver's license.
Cool.
So it's really simple, but you do have to keep your completion certificate for the course, and you have to have your
driver's license,
your physical that your doctor signed off in your logbook.
Cool.
Okay, which, unless you're a sport pilot, does not have to be with you in the airplane.
It's got to carry mine, but I can, so I was going, yeah, I come down here, so we can sign out, so. Yeah, you know what, it's easier to defer these guys. If you got it, just go, okay, what do you want?
If you want to be safe, carry it with
here,
you. But,
you know,
Yeah.
I mean, typical, Steve Frost 15 years ago, if you, well, I don't have to have that. Oh, yeah, okay, asshole. Okay, here's where everything else is, so. Anyway, it's an easy program. So, anyway.
Okay, thanks.
And there's a lot more people using it than we thought were going to use it.
Yeah,
We, number one, thought that it would be hard to find a doctor that would be willing to sign it off, but nobody's having trouble finding docs doing it.
This year,
And I think there's over 15,000 people on basic med already.
Yeah, you don't have, it doesn't have to be an anti-FAA thing.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's how it's gonna come across at first, and
Yeah,
it's a user-friendly system.
and believe it or not, not only the Air Force for Aero Clubs have approved it, so is Civil Air Patrol too, so,
Yeah, you can still fly searches,
yeah.
you can still pro rata share,
Yeah,
and you
Yeah.
can fly IFR.
They're just not commercial.
It's a good deal.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, any more questions? Anything anybody wants to add before we get started with our wonderful speaker who's gonna dazzle us, believe me, actually. Okay.
Somebody else talking or?
Well, Bob needs to actually, Bob, do you have anything you need to say?
Yes.
Oh, here we go.
I'm easy tonight, come on, guys. Maintenance wise, 5.7 is down, we gotta pull a prop, we have a dome leak on that thing, so 5.7, it just came out of the 100-hour. It's grounded again, and trying to find out when the guy can take the propeller, pull it apart, put in new seals, and put it back together. So we're looking probably first of the year, that's just a guess, I'm not sure. 29 Foxtrot, found some universal joints for the yoke, so they're in shipment. We hope we got them out tonight. They'll be out tomorrow out of Texas. Found the last 2 in the United States, and they're back ordered to February of 18. We're still, we've changed all the T-34 times to time in service, so you may see a disparity between the 50-hour and the 100-hour inspection when you guys log it out. The 100-hour is time in service based on a formula that we've been accepted with the IA. Therefore, we're extending our times for actual flight time, not just a hops time. Because in essence, you can have 1,000 hours on the ground, and now you got to come back and do a wing inspection when the airplane has never flown. So what we're doing now is we're taking the time, we're calculating what the ground time is, and then putting that time in service until I can get the electronic tachometers on order and placed in the aircraft. Once we do that, we'll be back to tack times. The tack time of them will start at either 1,200 or 1,250 RPM. I haven't decided where I'm gonna go. And they will shut off on the ground and during idle so that there's no time applied to the engine and airframe, which is basically where we're going for time and service. We've had a couple issues here. Does everybody know what the altitude is inbound and outbound for the Aero Club aircraft? How many people know what altitude we're supposed to be at? Nobody knows what altitude? Do I have an answer? 2,500. Okay.
Unless you ask for different.
That's right. And who's going to give you that? Tower. So if you want to go above 2,500, you want to enter above 2,500 because those are mandatory altitudes with the unmanned aircraft that we have going in and out. And they're becoming more and more frequent here at March Air Force Base. So with the unmanned aircraft, 2,500 is a hard altitude. Just remember that. And if we want to exceed that, call the tower and see if you can get clearance to exceed the 2,500 and climb above that. Jim, did you want to speak on that a little bit?
Sure. Okay, so we're talking about the big unmanned aircraft, but we also have more small unmanned aircraft. So we've approved about 3 more Part 107 COAs. What they're asking for now is up to our unmanned aircraft maximum altitudes that we've set for the Class C. So in various areas, they're all the way up to 400 feet, but most of them are capped around 250 feet AGL. So if you're operating in the airspace, be aware that there's going to be small unmanned aircraft flying both day and night, and they have blanket clearance to fly in the Class C, and all they have to do is call the tower and let us know. Okay? Okay, so that's coming up. We've got some operations coming up, non-standard operations for the next quarter. The first half of January, we're going to have F-16s deployed here, so expect to see that in the afternoons and evening. They want to train here. Probably in March, we're going to have some parachute operations on the field. We're trying to support an AETC course here, and they've asked us to support that. So it's so that might be happening. And then obviously the air show is on the 7th and 8th of April. Okay, so expect the airfield to be shut down probably Wednesday all the way through to next Tuesday. Okay. Thanks, Bob.
I've heard if you're going to runway 32, you come in at 3,500?
No, stay at 2,500. That's my understanding.
My understanding is initial for 3.32 is 3,500 feet.
The initial for 3.2 is 35
Yeah.
feet, but we're talking the standard Aero Club air, when you're taking off of runway, the little runway you're coming inbound.
Yeah, the little runway is 2,500,
Yes.
but the big runway is
Yeah,
3,500
you're
for
correct
initial.
right there. Just when you're coming in from the training areas, a couple times we've had people a little high,
Yeah.
going out a little bit high, and it's never been an issue, but my guys just wanted to bring it up.
Yeah, and we came back today at 3,500 for the big runway, asked for 25, no
Yeah.
problem,
Right.
worked great.
And it's not a major issue, we just don't want it, because we plan just like ours, like the 25, the 3, and the 35, we don't want anybody getting run over.
Yep, you are correct.
It'd be a bad day.
This is it.
Thank you, Bob.
One of the things I want to mention with Mr. Morimoto here on these little drone aircraft, a helicopter had an in-flight strike with a drone. The drone was above 500 feet. It did some pretty extensive damage to the propeller, or I should say to one of the blades. They did land safely, and it happened to be a Black Hawk, if I recall what I read. And that little drone was out of sight. So some of these people are supposed to be cut off at certain altitudes. Don't trust them. Do not trust them. And some people have them registered like they're supposed to, other people aren't. So just be aware that if there is a warning out or there's been notification from the base here saying that we have these drones operating in a certain area, just be aware that they may not be at that particular altitude, and just be aware. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Bob. Okay, anybody else have anything to say? Okay, Darren. Darren Chung is a retired Marine, F-18 pilot, and he's going to share with us what tonight's subject is.
Yep. Thanks, Bob. Did you advance the slide?
Yeah.
Howdy, everybody. More or less new club member. The agenda for tonight, I'll go through a little bit of admin for Wings and the FAST program, or the FAA Safety Team Wings program. I'll introduce the case study. I'll show the video. It's about 17 minutes. It's pretty good. It's produced by AOPA, Air Safety Institute, and then we'll, about 10 minutes afterwards, for just kind of discussing a couple ideas. Slide. Okay, so I'm new to the Wings program. When I joined the club back in August, I started getting all that paperwork together and, well, really just logging on to the website. If you're not familiar, it's really easy. Maybe as easy or easier than Basic Med. You go onto the site, you fill out a little bit of information, you put in your email address, your home address, and your airman certificate number, and then you're kind of off to the races. And they've got a really good, I think, syllabus or curriculum that kind of pulls from all over the place. I know the King Schools provides some free as well as at cost classes that kind of get funneled through. I'm not really sure how they pick their classes, how the FAA does, but there's a whole bunch of different organizations that feed into the Wings program. So tonight, the case study that we're doing is actually the Wings course ALC 425, and it's called Final Approach. It's a phase 1 class. It covers knowledge topic 2. And we'll look at topic areas like basic flying. We'll talk a little about human factors at the end, weather, and cross-country planning. You can take a look at the Wings user guide for the whole list of other things that fall inside of that topic too. And like I said, it's produced by AOPA. It's a pretty good piece of gear. Real quick, Wings admin, if you haven't been to the Wings portal. Slide. That's what it looks like when you log in. That's me logged in right there. So you just hit the login button, put all your information in there, and then you're off to the races. Slide again. And then this is your kind of the link into your Wings portal one more time. And then this is like my Wings user page. So that's kind of your home page, your dashboard for how you're progressing through the Wings program. I just started, so I've got some stuff in the basic program, and then I've got some stuff active in the advanced program as well. But like I said, there's lots of really good curriculum, good videos. This one, the one that we're doing tonight, I kind of stumbled across. It's 17 minutes, and you watch the video and you have a discussion, and it's credit for those knowledgeers. So as we say in the Marine Corps, pretty good piece of gear. Slide. So the case study tonight is a actual mishap that occurred. It's a fatal mishap that occurred on the East Coast a few years ago. Some of the things, I won't dive too far into the video because it really explains itself, but some of the things to think about that we can discuss afterwards. Weather planning, the concepts of am I legal or am I safe? And there is a difference there. And just think about that as you progress through and watch the video. On the aircraft and personal readiness side, there is a difference between current and proficient, and we're definitely going to see a lot of that in the video. Think about what that means to yourself. You may be legal and current per the FAA for your logbook and everything else, but are you really ready to go out and dive into the goo or fly at night to an unfamiliar airport if you haven't flown in 60 days or something like that? On the as far as mindset goes, your expectations and your options, the actions that we can take that are either proactive or reactive. And in some cases, you can only be reactive. When the weather changes, sometimes the forecast doesn't, or what you see didn't agree with what the forecast is. So you are driven into somewhat of a reactive mindset there. But what can you do on the proactive side? And we'll talk about that afterwards. And then on the last one there, assertiveness. There's times as pilots where we have to lead, and there's other times where we have to follow. And in many respects, when we're talking ATC, especially if you're an instrument-rated pilot, you're taking vectors. You are being led to a certain extent around. You may know where you want to go, but ATC is going to have something different for you, and you've got to be ready to follow. So without further ado, I'll pull up the video. Pardon me? Everybody see it?
It's 6:45 p.m. on January 13, 2013. A gloomy, overcast evening on the mid-Atlantic coast. 3 miles from the end of runway 14 over
Loud enough for everybody?
a pilot arrow glides silently through the clouds, propeller windmilling in the storm breeze. Its pilot searching desperately for the glow of runway lights through the view. Just a few hours earlier, such a dire situation is almost unthinkable. In Sandersville, Georgia, the Arrow's pilot, an orthopedic trauma surgeon, is preparing for a routine aerial commute to Delaware's Summit Airport. He's scheduled to perform surgery in nearby Dover the following morning. It's 10 a.m. when he requests a DUATS briefing for an afternoon flight. The verdict is mixed. IFR conditions prevail over a large swath of the mid-Atlantic, and terminal forecasts call for ceilings of 300 and 400 feet, with visibilities of 2 miles in mist and light rain. Starting around 4 p.m., however, conditions are expected to improve significantly, with visibility increasing to 6 miles and ceilings rising above 1,000 feet. It's not an ideal forecast, but given the pilot's qualifications, it's hardly a showstopper. The 600-hour private pilot is instrument rated and current, with nearly 80 hours of actual IMC logged. He's flown 30 hours in the previous 90 days, and his airplane has a WAAS-enabled Garmin 430 and an STEC 30 autopilot. Timing his arrival in Delaware to coincide with the expected break in the weather, the pilot files for a 1:30 p.m. departure and chooses Baltimore, where the weather is forecast to improve more dramatically, as his alternate. At liftoff, Arrow 49er75 Sierra is carrying in excess of 5 hours of fuel, plenty it would seem, for a 3-hour, 45-minute flight. 3 hours and 20 minutes pass before the first hint of trouble. By this time, the pilot is on initial approach to Summit Airport, but ATC has troubling news.
And November 7th, Sierra, Philadelphia approach just as boom as a guy with missed approach on Summit and was unable to land at Wilmington. Had to divert out Philadelphia airspace. Okay, he did not land at Summit, huh? And November 7th, Sierra, affirmative, sir, he was unable to land at Wilmington as well. All right, I guess I'm going to have to divert. Let's look for an airport that I can divert into.
Salisbury Airport, 53 miles south, apparently seems a promising candidate, and the pilot asks the controller for the latest weather there.
Salisbury, correction, Salisbury 21290 observation as ceiling 400 foot overcast and 8 miles visibility. I want to try Salisbury. And there was 7,000 Sierra, you're cleared via right turn direct, maintain 5,000.
By the time the pilot diverted to Salisbury, it was clear that the earlier forecast of rising ceilings was, if not wrong, then at least mistimed. What's less clear is whether the pilot could have been aware of this earlier in the flight. We don't know whether he called for updates en route, but in any case, there likely were no meaningful updates. The relevant forecasts had not been revised, and his earlier briefing had led him to expect conditions to improve only late in the flight. The decision to divert was another matter. Given the reported weather and the aircraft's fuel status, Salisbury was not an entirely unreasonable choice, despite being 25 minutes away. Nevertheless, from a broader perspective, it does point to a couple of worrisome issues. First, much like his selection of Baltimore as an alternate, the pilot's choice of Salisbury seems to indicate a lack of big-picture weather awareness. Given that similar conditions prevailed over the entire area, the odds of the weather being significantly better at any nearby airport were slim. Second, his conversation with Dover Approach hints at a somewhat passive attitude toward ATC. Hearing the news about the other aircraft's failed approaches, the pilot simply took it for granted that he wouldn't be able to land at his destination. At no point did he inquire about the approaches flown or the actual weather conditions. Together, such lapses set the stage for much greater difficulties ahead. Half an hour after the pilot's initial exchange with Dover approach, November 7-5 Sierra is 11 miles out on the RNAV runway 14 approach to Salisbury.
Passing Hires in review on the GPS to 14. So that's Sierra, report around runway 14.
The RNAV approach to runway 14 has a decision altitude of 306 feet AGL when flown to LPV minimums. LPV requires a WAS-enabled GPS and provides both horizontal and vertical guidance, much like a traditional ILS. For reasons that are unclear, however, the pilot discontinues the approach while still nearly 300 feet above decision altitude.
75 Sierra is going miss. 75 Sierra, contact approach.
Shortly thereafter, approach control calls Salisbury Tower to let them know that the pilot is attempting the RNAV approach again, rather than switching to the ILS from the opposite direction. Alas, the second attempt goes even worse, with the aircraft deviating from the final approach course and declaring a missed approach 200 feet above decision altitude.
And Tower, for some reason my GPS is not working right. Let me pull up and we'll try it again.
After being handed off to approach, however, the pilot decides he's had enough of Salisbury. He queries the controller about weather at Georgetown, Delaware, 22 miles back to the north. Upon learning that the reported ceiling there is 700 feet, he sets a course for airport number 3. Together, the attempts to land at Salisbury raise one of the central questions of the flight. Why, after 2 failed GPS approaches, would the pilot not avail himself of the ILS approach to the opposite runway? The wind was calm, the ILS offered significantly lower minimums, and programming would have been a snap. We'll never know for certain, but there are a couple of potential explanations. It's possible, for example, that the pilot was simply uncomfortable with ILS approaches. It seems more likely, however, that the option was simply overlooked. It was dark, the pilot was flying solo in IMC, things were not going well, and fatigue was likely setting in. It was a situation ripe for mistakes. It was also a circumstance in which ATC might have been able to help. The airport wasn't busy, and the controllers knew the pilot was having trouble with the RNAV approach. Under the circumstances, a simple suggestion to try the ILS might have made a real difference. Whatever the case, by the time November 7-5 Sierra headed back north, having burned an hour of its fuel reserve, the situation had become vastly more serious. It's now 6:01 p.m., roughly an hour past the pilot's original ETA, and he's just been cleared for the RNAV runway 22 approach at Georgetown, Delaware.
About Sierra, I got the Georgetown 2254 to do observations. Wind is estimated at 1.7 knots, visibility with mist. Ceiling is overcast of 300 feet. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
The ceiling is 400 feet lower than reported just 10 minutes earlier. It's also slightly below minimums for the approach, but the pilot opts to proceed anyway. This time he descends 100 feet below minimums, but the end result is the same.
Over, I got to go around again at 7-5 Sierra.
Number 2 Mike Sierra, that contact 1 mile south coast, airport 3 coach traffic.
Let's try that again, please.
Number 7 Mike Sierra, Roger, time maintain 3,000.
Now, however, there's a new concern. Fuel. It's 6:26 p.m., 4 hours and 55 minutes into the flight.
I'm running pretty low. How about 2? Would that be okay?
Number 7 Mike Sierra, time maintain 2,000. Remaining 1,700, turn left to 40 feet. Number 7 Mike Sierra, Roger, going to operate airport away.
Well, yeah, I think that's easy to do.
Number 7 Mike Sierra, control 32 to the runway, sir.
And is the weather better there?
So the South Florida fire weather is the currently combined visibility, similar probably to the overcast, a little bit better than Georgetown.
All right, 33 November, thank you.
As the aircraft nears Dover Air Force Base en route to 3-3 November, the pilot asks a logical question.
Now, I also want to say, Jeff, I can land at Dover.
So the 75 Florida, it's an emergency, everything has been here.
Okay, that's there.
But it is an emergency. 10 minutes later, and 8 miles north of the base, there's a frantic call from the pilot of 75 Sierra.
Ma'am, I'm declaring an emergency here. I'm out of fuel. I am out of fuel and going down.
By the time the pilot asked Dover approach about landing at the base, he'd been airborne for 5 hours. From his flight planning, or failing that, his fuel gauges, he must have known that he had precious little time left, and he still had more than 10 miles to go before commencing a non-precision approach in marginal weather. How could any pilot consider that anything other than an emergency? The most likely explanation, sadly, is that he was ashamed to confess his predicament, and all too aware of the fact that he was talking to a military controller about landing at an Air Force base. Those factors, coupled with the controller's strong, if appropriately qualified statement about landing at the base, are likely what kept him pushing on in silence, despite the dire situation, and ultimately what cost him his life.
Ma'am, I'm declaring an emergency here. I'm out of fuel. I am out of fuel and going down. Give me directors, please.
So the South Florida can wait here, we're going to go up to 2 hours and non-auto
Over the next few minutes, confusion reigns as the approach and tower controllers attempt to vector the stricken aircraft for landing at Dover.
I'm out of fuel and going down.
Number 75 Field, Commercial Public Park, 6 miles.
Keep talking to me, please.
Number 75 Field,
I'm going down.
Number 75 Field, do you have the 26?
Negative, negative, negative.
Number 75 Field, 117 grams, 50 grams, sir.
I'm still heading in the right direction, 75 Sierra.
Number 75 Sierra, Thunder, sir, if you want to get heading in the right direction, you can expect to in the right direction, this is a short place to again.
On course, but out of energy. Shortly thereafter, the aircraft collides with trees 2 miles off the end of the runway and crashes to an abrupt, fatal halt. The crash of November 7-5 Sierra is something of an enigma. While it's easy to see how a pilot of modest experience could find himself suckered in by marginal weather and an inaccurate forecast, the mistakes that turned bad luck into tragedy are harder to understand. In the end, though, what matters is what we can learn. And this is a case with no shortage of lessons. The first and most obvious is that weather can be a deal breaker. And when conditions argue for a change of plans, safe pilots listen. Forecasts can be wrong, and it's particularly important to be wary when conditions are expected to improve. If you decide to go, always leave yourself an out and get updates en route. Weather is dynamic, and our decision-making process needs to be equally dynamic. Likewise, avoid focusing too narrowly on the destination airport. Zoom out and look at the whole region. Legal doesn't always equal safe, and in a large weather system, the only realistic alternates may be far away, which means carrying plenty of extra fuel, even if it requires a stop en route. A good rule of thumb with large systems is to start with twice the fuel required to reach your destination. Even then, it's still critical to have a viable plan B, and if that falls through, to speak up about your situation in the clearest possible terms. Don't be afraid to expand your options by using the E word. had the pilot, instead of saying, quote, "I'm running pretty low," declared an emergency and told the Dover approach controller that he had less than 20 minutes of fuel, he'd probably be alive today. That points to another issue. Military airfields are fair game in emergency situations. There may be some explaining to do after you land, but it's a small price to pay to ensure a safe outcome. Awareness of approach options and the ability to exercise those options is also important. A diversion in low weather at night is no time to be hesitant about GPS programming or unaware of an ILS approach to your own. Finally, there's the matter of decision making. It can be tempting to hope that one more try will fix things. But in truth, you're usually just digging a hole deeper. Try something different. Don't let plans and expectations become blinders that keep you from seeing better options. The crash of November 7-5 Sierra was a tragedy not only for the pilot, his family, and friends, but for the medical community as well. It seems safe to say that, had the accomplished surgeon faced a crisis during an operation, he would have availed himself of every resource to save his patient. In a case with many ironies, the fact that he was unable to extend the same level of care to himself is perhaps the saddest.
We'll come back to, I got one slide for you.
Okay.
So we, in aviation, certainly in military aviation, we learn a lot from mishaps and accidents and near misses. And you know, we don't play this to bring you down. I mean, it sucks to hear somebody dying from a completely preventable situation. But like they talked about in there, the thing we had to do now is to learn from this. So I've got a couple slides here, just kind of summary slides, and then we'll go with the discussion. So real quick, that's the airplane. Seemed to be fairly well equipped. He had fuel for just a little over 5 hours, it looked like, for a 3-hour, 45-minute flight. I'm starting to get into some of the human factors things there. He's a surgeon. He had surgery scheduled the next morning. So probably pretty important for him to get there. You're starting to see a mindset that can start to take into effect. The weather is IFR throughout, but it's supposed to get better and ends up not really getting better. But he decides to go anyways. And then what kind of pilot are we talking about? You're talking about a private pilot. I was able to pull up the NTSB report online and pulled up his total time and looked at what his currency was. So his 30-90-day currency, he was 15 hours of time in the last 30 days and 31 hours in the last 90. He had 0.8 hours of actual instrument conditions in the previous month and a little over 2 hours at the 90-day mark. And then for instrument approaches, we don't know if he shot precision or non-precision, but he had 1 in the last month and then 4 in the previous 3 months. Slide. So I was really interested to know who this guy was. We talk about mishaps in here. Mike Turner and I have had friends that have crashed airplanes in the Marine Corps. I'm sure everybody in here knows people that have been involved in mishaps and haven't come home. So I really wanted to learn a little bit more about this guy. So we'll go through here. Build the slide, please, Roger. So this guy, Dr. Turin, is an internationally renowned orthopedic surgeon. He's got a trauma background. He's got 28 years in the Navy Medical Corps, and he served as a medical officer of the SEALs. So starting to build a picture of who this guy is and sort of what maybe some of his tolerance levels are for risk. He worked as a firefighter and a fire officer and a dive team member and an instructor in Washington, D.C. And in Maryland. And then he also worked as a U.S. Marshal developing an EMS program for the Anti-Terrorism Task Force. I mean, for a guy that used to work with the SEALs as a medical guy, this seems like a pretty standard path for somebody who's a leader, who who teaches and really drives his industry. So that's some of his background. Build it again, please. So what we know he's a leader. We know he's a skilled practitioner, at least in medicine. We know that he's current in the aircraft. Some assumptions that we can make. He's probably comfortable, maybe more so than some of us are, in somewhat higher risk situations. So the weather's not great, but it's looking like it's going to get better. I'm instrument rated and I'm current. Maybe I can go flying. Some of us may say, you know what, that's a little too tight for me. Maybe I'll drive or take a commercial flight or change the surgery to another time. He has this expectation of accomplishing the mission, and I don't think that's a big stretch. For a guy that was a trauma surgeon and directed a trauma surgery center, worked with the SEALs, those are communities that get things done. And as those of us in here that come from a military aviation background, we do what it takes to get the job done. So you can kind of see he's started to dig that hole. He's competent as a surgeon. He was probably a fairly competent pilot, and he was trusted. So there's a lot of that weight that he may carry around in his pack of like, I've got to go and do this. I've got to get this job done. So what? So what do we do with that slide? So the conclusions that AOPA came up with, I just kind of summarized a little bit of what was on the video. Weather can be a deal breaker. Yeah, the forecast can be wrong. A lot of us have been flying around long enough can see that. Weather's dynamic, so our decision making has to be dynamic. We don't just go with the plan that we started off with in pre-flight. We understand the bigger picture, and we know that we have options. One option for him, what did he have out there that they pinged on for that first airport that he went into? Right, he had an ILS. So why did he not use the ILS? Maybe the winds were favoring the RNAV runway. Can we land with a tailwind?
Sure.
Yeah, we absolutely can land with a tailwind. You need to take a look at the considerations with that. If it's wet, if it's a short runway, if it's a narrow runway, you're complicating things, but you can land. That's another decision that you can make. So that's an option that he had. We don't know why he didn't take it. Legal doesn't always mean safe, right? He was completely legal to fly. And yet he dug himself a hole. Avoid focusing on the destination, right? We hear in aviation that the term "get there-itis," right? We've got to get home, or we've got to get to accomplish the mission, and we'll do kind of whatever it takes to get there. He had surgery that he was going to perform the next morning, so he needed to get there. And what he allowed his plan to do was kind of become blinders to the ever-changing weather dynamics that were out there. The rule of thumb of 2 times the fuel required to reach the destination, that speaks to this concept that you hear in aviation a lot about your personal limits. So you've got your currency limits, your legal limits that you're required to meet, and then you have your personal limits. And maybe my personal limits are not that I'm going to shoot a precision or non-precision approach down to minimums. I'm going to accept that weather. I'm going to bump my weather up because I'm just not that current, or I'm not that proficient. I haven't flown as much lately, and maybe I need to bump up the weather on myself. Recognizing an emergency situation. They hammer that pretty good in there. I don't know what it is, but I don't like saying emergency on the radio. I've done it a couple times. I haven't done it in a civilian airplane, but I've done it once or twice in a military airplane. I don't know why I don't want to say it, because the seas part when you use the E word. And he did there, and they parted, but again, too little, too late. Most of us, since we're based on a military runway here, it's probably not difficult for us to imagine, look, I'll just land there. Like Miramar Tower, I need to land, I'm going to go there, and you're going to push your way in. That kind of speaks a little bit to the, am I leading or am I following right now? And if he would have asserted himself and realized, I've got a no kidding emergency that I made for myself, or I now find myself in, then he could have started directing ATC. And you use the E word, and that's basically you're leading the way at that point. Now help me get to where I need to go.
Devin?
Yes, sir.
One of the things about emergencies is that I'm sitting here listening to you, but sometimes if I declare an emergency, it sounds like I've made a mistake on my part, and therefore I don't want to admit that I made the mistake.
Right.
When it's really, you got to look at what you're trying to do to save your behind.
Yeah. When I was learning how to fly the F-18 and we were going out to the ship to go practice landing, we all come back at night, and they'll send 9 or 10 airplanes out there, and the ship is always 200 miles away, and there's always weather in Miramar. And what you end up getting is this like line of F-18s. Everybody is fuel critical, and everybody's checking into SoCal emergency fuel, and they're like, right, your emergency like the 3 guys before you and the 3 guys that are checking in after you. Get in line, and we'll bring you in for GCAs. It's how it goes. In that case, we kind of know to expect that. And SoCal is very familiar with the hijinks of the F-18 training squadron down there. It's just kind of how things go. But that would make you believe that you're not going to get priority handling. And the reality is you actually do get priority handling when you use the E word. And yes, there's paperwork to do. And yes, you're going to have people that are looking at you. And the club manager's going to look at you. The air traffic control folks are going to look at you. And you're going to have to do some explaining. But you know what? You're there to do it, at least. Yes, sir.
How much time did he still have in the air when first time he asked if Dover was available?
I don't remember. I watched the video about.
You think that part right there? He's thinking private pilot up to a military base.
Yeah. Well, and you're right, Stephen. And the words that the controllers used, this is it's a team effort when we fly, and the words that the controller used, and they hit it right. I mean, I couldn't say it better than AOPA said it. It was technically accurate. You cannot land here unless you're an emergency aircraft, and that probably kind of had him shy away, and so that not helpful. But again, ATC's there to do what you want them to do, and if you're not going to tell them you need something.
Right. In my point,
you got to communicate.
In his mind right there, he's probably starting to think,
Yeah.
I'm fuel critical.
Yeah, Rich.
Two things. Number one, backing up there, I cannot tell you how many times I've declared an emergency. I do not have enough fingers and toes to get there. But I can tell you how many times I've had to fill out paperwork. Absolutely none. They hate paperwork just as much as you do. If you declare an emergency, they get you on the ground, they're happy, you're happy, everybody goes home happy. When you declare an emergency, there is a horrendous role reversal. Darren kind of alluded to it. Under normal conditions, we're running around IFR or VFR under control from ATC. We're doing what they tell us to do. Once you declare an emergency, they're doing what you tell them to do. And the biggest example I can give you of that is an American Airlines flight going into Dallas, short on fuel, declared an emergency, wanted to land opposite direction of normal traffic. Tower denied it and made him land in the traffic flow. They gave him priority, number one, but they made him drive all the way past the airport, come back around and land. ATC got disciplined, pilot got disciplined. Once he declares an emergency, he's the boss. Once you declare the emergency, the world is yours. You tell them what you want, they make it happen. Pure and simple.
Thanks, Rich.
Again, he only had 20 minutes of emergency. He should have started thinking about it when he was at 4 hours, because he only had an hour and a half of fuel left.
Right.
I've got some other stuff.
Yeah, this is the second missed RNAV approach. This scenario is just ripe with
and I've always shot an instrument approach to the lowest minimums, not to the next upper above that. Because if I fly to the lowest minimums, I may see something earlier in the clear, that if I do it at a higher elevation, I may not make it.
Right. Yeah, we don't know why he broke off the approach early, because he didn't take the first two approaches down. Yes, sir.
Why didn't you call ahead of the ground before the call? What was disappeared compared to what he got in the report?
Well, so, I mean, what they said was they don't know, they didn't know if he called flight service en route. But I mean, it's a 3.5 hour, 3 hour and 45 minute flight. So certainly conditions could have changed. We don't know if he called ahead or if he didn't. It's arguable that if he would have called his destination airport when he left 3.5 hours before, or 3 hours and 45 minutes before, he would have got, the weather's what you saw, keep pressing. So I don't know if that's the thing, because they kind of talked about that in the video. We just don't know if he called flight service.
He's still assuming that the time of route is going to be better.
Yeah. So we're kind of talking through these again. I talked a little about the assertiveness, the proactive and reactive mindsets. We're kind of all over that as well. Current and proficient. For those of us who are, only, civilian pilots, we're not doing the commercial piloting. We're not driven to hold ourselves to like airline standards or the military currency standards. We can find ourselves in that